Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and here we are in Albany. This is Albany, right? Yeah, this is Albany. Here we are in Albany, doing some sort of light work to start off the day. So, the first thing was getting these buffer stops in. I extended a track there, which is largely for helper engines, because this is a helper spot. The lower route through the gorge is, of course, less taxing, but it's much worse in terms of, length. But the same engine could probably handle it, whereas going over the upper gorge is much more difficult on the short run side. Now, I'm not the one to do the math to figure out if going the low route is better or not, but whatever. If you have a train you can't make it over, you get a helper. If you can't do that, you come the lower route. Anyways, so I went and did a lot of fluff today. This is an episode where mostly, you'll notice I extended that tunnel a minute ago, which is the first big track modification around here in a little while. But I'm adding signals, I'm not adding track marks yet, but it's something I should do. I'm adding signals, I'm adding crossovers at the signals because, well, frankly, when you're doing what you're doing, when you're doing this with AI, you're gonna almost need to have crossovers every time you meet a signal. And the reason for that is you need those AI to be able to... I scrapped that river in a second. You need those AI to be able to have a signal where if two trains are coming at one another on the same track, they need to be able to dodge one another. And if they can't, that's going to lead to gridlock. And this isn't locomotion. The trains aren't going to turn around and try again. They're just going to stay there, and they're going to give you an error saying, hey, we can't move. So that's the moment where you need to step in and go, okay, well, let's fix this. And if you can't, because they're stuck at the same signal in the middle of nowhere, then, well, you're kind of boned. Anyways, there are a couple of areas that need signals and a couple of areas that won't get them. And one of those areas is the dual gauge line that runs over to Scotch Flats from High Meadow Park. And the reason for that is because it is dual gauge and because it would be very difficult to signal. Anyways, this is me, and the game was not really cooperating here, so I had to go about it a different way. Fortunately, in 8 times speed, it takes the sort of jitteriness out of it, because I was not able to do any of this very fast. The map is getting huge and complicated, and it's getting more and more difficult to work with, so hopefully this project will not be too much longer, although if you look at the amount of work we have to do, God knows it's going to be. I have officially put forth the idea of building Douglas DeCavan. He seems interested, so that's quite good. Because that's the only big town that we're missing, not including the 3-foot gauge, which is, well, that's a whole thing in and of itself. Anyways, and of course this isn't going to be multiplayer compatible anyway, so I don't need to worry about the 3-foot gauge being, what's the word? Difficult to run with the rolling stock or anything like that. Anyways, I had to go back and redo this because I cut into it a little bit. I'm adjusting that slightly, and then we come back into here. Albany is a place that I work with pretty greatly through this episode, and the reasoning is because it's getting towards the section of the map that doesn't have any signals, doesn't have really anything in terms of amenities. You know, the distance between a lot of these towns is, well, it's not insignificant, but it's not hugely distant. And I should go back and check on the line between Sugar Creek and Brandville because, well, I think it's set up for two-way running, and that's going to be a problem if there aren't any crossovers to, prevent the situation I was just talking about. So putting in the regulation CNR switch stands, and then I go in here and fool around a bit, and, I'm doing this. At what point do I do... Okay, I make a significant change here in a minute. And I'll let you know when we get to it, and if I miss it, that's a shame, because that's why this episode is named the way it is. I add that, which is another just sort of helper track, so the helper can duck out of the way, although it probably needs to be longer, all things considered. I add this track because I realized there was no way to get from the gorge route into the yard, and that's a problem. And of course I'm doing the signaling very carefully here, where in reality you'd probably see a lot more signals, and I don't have any gantries. Those could be more useful. But, yeah, anyways, I'm going through this, and I'm looking for dwarf signals that I like. So, if you get what I'm doing here, those are little PL dwarves, and the reason I decided to use them is because I think the CNR dwarves look clunky and kind of stupid. So, due to the fact that we've already stated that in the history this line was signaled with position lights, I go through here and I grab these and I replace all of them with little dwarf PLs. Now, good luck reading them, but they really aren't that complicated. Anyways, here we go, adding more. I kept getting distracted and sort of shifting the camera away because I knew there was a lot I had to do and I wasn't really doing all of it. Of course, I can't do all of it in a 2-hour stretch anyways, but, you know, what I'm saying is, once again I find myself torn. On one hand I have this to do, on the other hand I have that to do, and I'm not really doing either of them because I'm not sure which to do. Now, something I will point out during my signal reorganization, I tried to keep signals before crossing, so you wouldn't have a train parked across a railroad crossing. For realism, and B, so that our fictional Iron Horseman Railway didn't get any fictional letters from fictional drivers that were fictionally very upset. Because we don't want to get fictionally sued. Anyways, so these signals, and of course those, I wasn't going to use the PL dwarves anywhere except for yards, and I wasn't going to use the stand-up signals anywhere where trains would collide with them. So I had to be fairly careful about my signaling and my approach to signaling. And I'm really not sure how all this is going to work. I need to test it out with a bunch of AI trains and track marks, which is something I'll get to later. Of course, we have a diamond intersection there, which I know trains aren't really the best with, but never mind, we've moved on. Alright, I told myself I'd save the heavy-duty terrain work for the second half of the episode. Although I don't really do a lot of that here because I'm still distracted with other stuff, namely signaling and track work. I'm not sure. Let me go ahead and check real quick which version of the Iron Horseman route is the newest one in terms of version number. We are on, for the progress map, it's still listed as alpha 0.05, or 0.5. But if I go into the CDP backups page, we have the Iron Horseman Railway version 0.5.2, which was September 10th, which is 2 weeks ago. Anyways, once again, I'm going through here, and I'm leaving ample space because I can't, like I've said, I physically cannot, and I could, theoretically, add some signals for right side, to help with right side running, but I'd have to make it so that it is right side running, you know. It would be something that would lead to trouble, not in any sort of short or long run, but if you started fooling around, it would allow trouble. It's something I should do, actually, because it would help, and it would sort of establish the trend of right side running. I had to get rid of some extra signals there, putting in a signal there, one here. I go ahead and signal the oil plant here. But yeah, so Douglas is going to be very important, and I may work on what is probably going to be the track work, because I need Kevon to build the city, but I'm not really sure how I want to do the track work yet, and I need to sort that out at least in my head, and maybe even work on that with him and Wybold, just to sort of get a feel for how everything's supposed to line up. Once again, I'm being very careful with these signals here, because I don't want there to be a point where a signal or switch stand is clipping into a train. Even though it's more or less impossible, I want to be as good about it as I can be. And I'm trying to put the signals in sensible locations. Honestly, on the outermost track, I should leave the, make it signal less, because you wouldn't be parking a train there. I shifted those signals to outside the crossing. I come back here and I redo some of these signals. You can have superfluous ones as long as they're all facing in the same direction, and that you never have two that are back to back. Those are the worst offenders in terms of creating trouble for the AI, because it's very simple. You look at the easiest way to look at it is from the locomotion point of view, and granted, the trains AI and the locomotion AI aren't that similar, but they're not too different either. But my point is, if you have a two-way stretch of track with a two-way signal in the middle of it, the train is going to come to one side and come to the other, and they're both going to be staring at each other angrily, and no one's going to move. Alright, so this was if you recall how I did the section above this, I did it with terrain tracks and then copy-paste, and that's really what most of the rest of this episode is dedicated to. Instead, I'm going to sort of concept Douglas, because the important thing about Douglas, other than being, even though Troy was slated to be, it is actually the largest city on the Iron Horseman route, and it's the only one that really, well, I mean, Troy looks pretty city-like, but it looks really, commercial city-like. Like Troy, except larger, and probably better, because Kevin's the one doing it, not me. Anyways, if you guys remember how Toronto looked from the CNR Toronto Rail lands, that's not quite what I want, but it's kind of what I'm going for. Like, I think I need to find a good Union Station for it, and I may use more than one. This is the meeting point of probably 3 railroads, at least. You have the Milwaukee Road, which is going to the east out of the city. You have the Iron Horseman Railroad, which is going to the west out of the city, obviously. And then you have the probably Canadian National or Canadian Pacific, which comes in from the north. And I'm going to have to work out exactly what that looks like. But it's probably going to be the northeast, unless the city has some particularly interesting geography, or the station is pointed a direction that I don't really think it's going to be pointed. It's going to work in a similar fashion to Washington, D.C., the terminal there, because you have a handful of tracks that are terminal tracks, as well as a handful of tracks that are through tracks for trains that continue. It is the only terminus of the Hawk that is actually pictured. The other terminus is off map, presumably somewhere down the coast where we meet with Southern Pacific. Anyways, this is me blocking out land, although I give up on that, and then I decided to take a whack at these rivers here, which need a little bit of love. There aren't actually waterfalls because, I don't know, whatever reason. I didn't build it. And because this line is significantly older than, most any line, or, most of the rest of the Iron Horseman route, I figured I could get away with a stone bridge, which turned out pretty good looking, actually. And I was trying to think of a place in reality where I knew a stone bridge like this, and then I realized there's one that's, not completely dissimilar on the Lackawanna Cutoff, which is something that used to be in my jurisdictions on the Terminus podcast, but it was removed because of inactivity. So, while it does look like it's something out of Britain, I was curious as to what that was. While it does look like it's something out of Britain, it kind of does what I wanted to do. We're going to have a bit of a canyon there, and, well, that's really going to be everything interesting then, isn't it? This line, I believe, descends towards Douglas. I'm not sure what elevation it's at, but let me give a look-see as to... Oh, never mind, the episode is going to end here shortly. So we got in a lot of the groundwork here. We've got to do more work in this section, and the other section, but then we move on. So, then I redid the signals for this, and I believe all of the high main line has signals and is more or less traversable, but I need to go back and add some one-way signals. Not direction markers, mind you, but some one-way signals. And some more crossovers between here and Wyvern and Albany, because those are long distances without anything at all at this moment. I also add, it takes me a minute, I go looking for something in particular. Was wondering what that was. There's a bunch of things I noticed here. There, I got that little red sign that I can put down there.